quest to find you guys the best value top tier gaming PC, we came across this pre-built. We've spent thousands of hours over this past year testing and reviewing many gaming PCs for you, and this one on paper looks like it should be the fastest one. This is our 100% honest and unbiased review of the Thermaltake Apollo 490. This configuration that we have here for you includes an AMD 7800X 3D CPU and 4090 GPU, the most powerful GPU. I'm going to quickly take you through the unboxing and what's included, gaming and creator benchmarks, design and build quality, the internals, thermals, fan noise, overall ease of use, pricing breakdowns and comparing its price to performance ratio against the competition, and my overall top likes and dislikes. Even if you decide against this PC after sharing what I found, just keep watching because I'm also going to be sharing with you some alternative PCs that I recommend for every budget. I'll have links down below for all the products that I mentioned, as well as tagged directly on this video, or this QR code if you're watching on a TV. I guarantee that by the end of this video, you will know if this PC is right for you or not. But first, let's rewind back into the past real quick and check out what came in the box. I'd like to thank Best Buy for sponsoring this video. Even before I became a tech YouTuber, Best Buy has always been my go-to store for anything tech. My favorite new release they just got is the Meta Quest 3S headset with Batman Arkham Shadow and a 3-month trial of Meta Quest Plus included. Plus, you can also get the Elite Strap for $20 off with a new Quest headset purchase. And when paired with an extra powerful gaming PC like the one that we're reviewing today, opening it up to the amazing world of PC VR, the gaming possibilities feel almost endless. But even outside of gaming, there's so much more that you can do with it. You can watch concerts with it, sports, YouTube, even fully 3D YouTube VR videos designed specifically for virtual reality, as well as other streaming apps. And then another really cool thing, even without buying an Xbox, you can play Xbox cloud games like Fortnite and Halo on a giant virtual screen in your room. There's even a lot of creative and exploring VR apps if you want a more leisure experience. The new Quest 3S has a 96 by 90 degree field of view and 773 pixels per inch. And to ensure great performance, they also equipped this headset with a Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 processor and 8 gigabytes of RAM. And to make sure all the motion looks smooth, it also has a 120 Hz refresh rate. The Touch Plus controllers were great too, but I especially loved being able to use my hands. The advanced tracking was spot on and colored mixed reality looked really good too. And at only $300, it's definitely by far the best bang for your buck VR experience that you can get right now. Now making VR more attainable and more giftable than it's ever been. For $60, you can actually get 2 years of accidental protection with Best Buy as well. This will buy you a lot of peace of mind as this is an active device, especially if you're into Meta's intense fitness games. I actually bought a Best Buy Total Tech membership a few years ago, and between member discounts and free protection plans, I've already saved about $1,000. Every single thing that I buy at Best Buy now includes a free protection plan. Most devices with accidental protection too. Click on the link below in the description or this QR code if you're watching on a TV to get the new Meta Mixed Reality headset, the Meta Quest 3S headset with Batman Arkham Shadow, and a 3-month trial of Meta Quest Plus included at Best Buy. But back to the PC, the first thing that you'll notice in the box, we've got a little quick start guide, then we've got your case manual, which actually is useful. And then this is new. They actually put the accessories bag inside the case. In here, they gave us some M.2 lockers for your SSDs, SATA cables for extra drives, a pretty handy quick installation guide, some Wi-Fi antennas, a massive power cable, and then some extra PCIe, Molex, and SATA cables for your power supply. This PC is built with a Thermaltake Series 500 TG mid-tower case, which I've always been a fan of. We've got this sort of randomized perforated design throughout, which allows for a good amount of airflow. On the front of the case, we've got 3 massive 140mm RGB fans and 140mm exhaust on the back. We also have 3 120mm exhaust fans on the top, and this is part of our all-in-one liquid cooling for our CPU. For those of you new to this, starting from our cooling block right here, the heat gets transferred using a liquid up through these tubes up into this 360mm millimeter radiator where the heat is spread out and then blown out the top. Then to the right of our CPU, they included 5600 megahertz Thermaltake Tough RAM. We've got two 16 gigabyte sticks for a total of 32. Then underneath our CPU, beneath this giant metal heatsink, is our SSD, which is our main drive that everything is installed on. This one is a Kingston Fury Renegade 1 terabyte drive, and when we put it to the test, we got speeds of about 3.7 gigabytes per second read and 3.4 write. This is surprisingly low for a top tier gaming PC, about half that of most of the other top tier pre-builds that we've tested. This won't really affect gaming, but just keep in mind if you copy a lot of massive files often, it's gonna take you a bit longer. And then beneath that, the most important part of this PC by far, our MSI Geforce RTX 4090 GPU. Love the fact that this PC comes with a GPU support bracket because this is one heavy GPU, even bigger than my massive FE 4080 Super. And after removing the GPU, you can see that we have two more SSD slots for even more high-speed storage, and then one more below the GPU that you can technically access without removing it. Also beneath the GPU, you get access to two extra full-size PCIe slots for any expansion cards that you might want to add in the future. All of this sits on an MSI Pro X670P Wi-Fi motherboard, which is actually one of the more expensive motherboards that I've seen included with pre-builds. And then below that, something that you don't see very often, access to your PSU from the front. And the bottom right panel can be removed as well to get access to your two extra 3.5-inch mechanical hard drives from the front rather than only from the back. There's also this optional LCD panel kit that you can replace this one with if you'd like to externally display your real-time stats, time, weather, or even your own GIF if you'd like to really customize it. If that sounds pretty cool to you, then I'll tag that right here in this video as well. Up in this empty area, we've also got space to mount two 2.5-inch SSDs or one 3.5-inch hard drive. And then swinging around to the back and removing that panel, this reveals even more storage mounting possibilities. These two sections can also hold a total of four 2.5-inch SSDs or two 3.5-inch hard drives. And then at the bottom left is the back access to those two 3.5-inch mechanical hard drives that we showed from the front. They also included this accessory box in here with zip ties and screws for mounting the hard drives. And then lastly, in the bottom right is the easier spot to access your power supply. The one included in this build is a Thermaltake Tough Power GF A3 1050 watt PSU. And then thankfully, because this power supply is modular, if you ever have to replace it, it's going to be a lot quicker because you're not going to have to rerun any of your cables. For the ports on the front, we've got one USB-C and two USB-As, a microphone and headphone jack, and a reset button. On the back, we've got a flash BIOS button, one HDMI and display port directly connected to the motherboard just in case your GPU isn't functioning properly. Then we've got 6 more USB-As and 2 more USB-Cs, a 2.5G Ethernet port, connectors for your Wi-Fi antennas, and your audio ports. And then on the back of your 4090 GPU, 2 HDMIs and 2 display ports. Now for the software, just like other pre-builts with MSI motherboards, we've got the MSI Center. In here, you can view all the real-time stats for your CPU, GPU, and RAM. Mystic Light gives you some very basic RGB animations. Unlike many other PCs that I've tested, every single internal component in this PC was all correctly synced right out of the box. And then the only other thing that is actually useful in here is the user scenario section. In here, you can set your fan profiles based on extreme cooling for better performance or silent when your PC isn't running too hot. The live section is pretty useful as well if you want to periodically double check to see if your drivers have any updates. And then for those of you that want even more control over fine tuning and overclocking, there is plenty more that you have access to within the BIOS as well. Now, when it came to the fan noise, these are my results after testing each of the main fan profiles in a somewhat quieter than normal room. In silent mode, it was about 41.5 decibels. And then during gaming and performance mode, it brought the fan noise up to just under 44 decibels. Nothing really to be concerned about here, as this is about average. Now for the thermals. You can see in our thermal imaging time-lapse from computer off to full-on gaming that as usual, we do get some heat built up on the glass right next to the GPU. And then opening up the side glass panel reveals in detail a little bit more where the hot areas are. Overall, it did a decent job removing the heat through the rear and top exhaust fans. The large majority of my testing was spent in actual gameplay though. And these were our CPU temps for several different games at 1080p. You can see that compared to the other similar spec top tier pre-builds that these temperatures were about average for the most part. And then averaging all 1080p gaming temperatures data together on all of the most recent PCs that we've reviewed, this gives us an even better overall perspective on how it stacks up against the competition. This was one of the cooler CPUs in a top tier pre-built that we've seen. 60.6 average degrees Celsius across all games at maximum graphic presets. And then jumping into 4K gaming, we organized this chart by the GPU because high resolution gaming puts a lot more stress stress on the GPU and less on the CPU, and this showed it to actually be one of the hotter GPUs that we've seen. But still, I'd say that 70 degrees isn't really something to be worried about. Now for the good stuff, performance and gaming benchmarks. And up next, the most important part of this review, the price to performance ratios. For Cinebench R23, which simulates its 3D rendering power, we got a multi-core score of 17,878 and a single core score of 1788. By the way, all rendering software can utilize multiple cores, so that's the most important score here. You can see here that, as some of you expected, this CPU that was not built for creative work did not perform nearly as well as the other top tier pre-builts that had Intel CPUs. Even i5 Intel CPUs beat this one. Another very helpful test for you 3D renderers out there is the V-Ray benchmark. And these were our CUDA, RTX, and overall V-Ray performance scores. The GPU rendering scores surprisingly showed it to be above average compared to everything else. This is an important score if you're doing a lot of high polygon 3D modeling or real-time viewport rendering and lighting. The overall V-Ray performance score, though, is a CPU-based rendering test that demonstrates how well a PC can handle the more advanced realistic rendering that takes a lot longer to calculate. And again, because this CPU is not built for rendering, it performed pretty poorly here as well. And the last set of benchmarks for creatives before we get into gaming are the Puget Benchmarks. For DaVinci Resolve, we got 3,093. This is about average. Adobe Premiere, 12,745. This score demonstrates if you primarily do a lot of editing in Adobe Premiere, you should probably go with a pre-built with a different CPU. In Photoshop, we got 9,662. This also appears slightly behind the rest, but honestly, you don't really need a fast PC to work in Photoshop. Unless you're getting into some crazy AI effects, then maybe. But even my 1 gigabyte Photoshop file with a lot of high resolution layers would have absolutely no problem with this PC. For 3D Mark, which is usually a good benchmark to determine a computer's overall game ability, we plugged in these overall graphic and CPU scores into our master chart, and you can see here that it actually ranked a little lower than expected. For some reason, the CPU score was pretty low here, but the graphics score was one of the highest we've ever seen. Actual gaming benchmarks are probably what you guys care the most about, though. And we took the many hours of testing from those games and averaged the FPS against the competition, and here you can see with 1080p gaming, it got some incredibly high FPS in each game. And then averaging all of those gaming FPS together gives us an even broader overall perspective on how this PC performed against the rest. This is the second highest average that I've ever seen come through this studio. The Corsair one above it actually had poor cooling and was way more expensive and cramped and not very upgradable. So this PC is the real number one if you ask me. Then in our 1440p tests, you can expect about an 11% drop in FPS. Our average was about 283 here. Again, the second highest that we've ever seen. And then checking out the FPS for each game individually at this resolution, you can see that almost every game is still hitting at least 200 FPS. In 4K, our average FPS dropped an additional 35% with an average of 183 FPS. For super high resolution gaming like this, you can see that it's actually a little below average. Since high resolution gaming is more GPU intensive and less CPU intensive, this means that the GPU is slightly underperforming in this pre-built. And then breaking it down game by game shows that we're still above 100 FPS in every game except for Cyberpunk. Still 73 FPS and 4K at ultra presets without DLSS is pretty amazing. Now for the most important part, the price to performance ratios. Right now at the time of this recording, this PC costs $3,300, which is several $100s less than what it normally is. But for the most up-to-date pricing, check out my links down in the comments and description below, or tag directly on this video, or use this QR code if you're watching on a TV. Because of how well this PC performed, it would actually still be worth it to me even if it went back up to that several $100s more. This chart shows that it's the second best value pre-built that we've ever seen with a 4090. The only one above it is that Alienware R16, and I would definitely go with this Thermaltake over that one, as this one is way more upgradable. And at 1440p, it actually even tied with the Alienware R16 for the best price to performance ratio. And then in 4K, it came in third compared to the other top tier PCs with 4090s. Now, if you're understandably at an entirely different price point, then these are my recommendations for every budget. I'll also include links down below in the comments and description for all of them, as well as tag directly on this video or using this QR code if you're watching on a TV. If this PC that I reviewed today is too much, then I would go with this Cooler Master TD5 Pro. $3,000 for an i9 4090 pre-built is a pretty amazing deal. If you need to be around $2,500, then I would go with this Skytech Legacy with the Ryzen 7 7800X3D CPU and 4080 Super GPU. It also has 64 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, which is actually kind of overkill, more than double what most games even take advantage of. I'd say 90% use probably about 16, but I guess you could use all that you can get for games like Microsoft Flight Simulator or maybe even GTA 6 if it ever releases. I've reviewed many Skytech gaming PCs and have always been very impressed with their quality and price to performance ratios. And speaking of price to performance ratios, for those with a budget under $2,000, hands down, not even a question, the Skytech King 95 with the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D CPU and 4070 Super GPU is what I recommend. I just recently reviewed this one, and for 1080p and 1440p gaming, it had the best price to performance ratio that I have ever seen. I'm still not completely sure how Newegg is actually even making money off of that PC selling it that inexpensive, because slower versions of that PC on Skytech's actual website actually cost more. My guess is that it won't be that price for that much longer. If you need to be closer to $1,000, then I would go with this ABS Stratos Aqua with an i5 14400F CPU and 4060 Ti GPU. This is one of the best sellers for this price range on Newegg, and it's also one of the highest rated. And I can tell you that as of this recording, it's not very common for you to find a decent pre-built gaming PC with an i5 and 4060 Ti GPU for this inexpensive. And if $1,000 is still too much, then I would get this exact version of this Thermaltake LCGS Quartz i350 with a 12th gen i5 and 3050 for $700. But that's the bare minimum that I would recommend for semi-decent low settings gaming. This will be a 1080p only gaming setup, definitely not 1440p or 4K. I wouldn't use it for creative work either. Photoshop would work as long as you don't have too many layers, but I just wouldn't use it for 3D modeling, editing, or rendering. If you're coming from a console like an Xbox Series X or a PS5 and you want your graphics to at least match that, then you'll need a PC with at least a 3060, or in this case, a 4060 GPU. So then I'd get the step up from that last Thermaltake and get this i4-60R4 for just $150 more. Overall, I wasn't too surprised that a pre-built gaming PC from a respected brand that had the absolute best CPU for gaming and the best GPU period. I wasn't surprised that it performed well, but I was also impressed with the fact that it was priced well, had a great design with attention to detail, and it was also very upgradable. One of the most upgradable mid-tower PCs that I've ever seen, with 2 extra full-size PCIe slots, 4 total high-speed SSD slots, as well as room for 8 extra 2.5-inch SATA SSDs, or 5 3.5-inch mechanical hard drives. The only thing that I don't really recommend it for is 3D rendering and 4K editing. It didn't necessarily do bad in those areas, but for this amount of money, you can get a better PC that's more tuned for that. For that, check out one of my Intel PC reviews. But a pre-built PC for mostly gaming, it doesn't get much better than this. If you do decide to purchase this PC or any of the others that I mentioned, then please remember to do so using my view products tag or affiliate links in the comments and description below, or this QR code if you're watching on a TV, as I get a small commission at no cost to you for every single purchase made. And it's actually a major factor in keeping this channel going and getting better and better for you. Also, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe with notifications turned on to stay up to date with all of my latest tech and gaming PCs. Thanks for watching. God bless.